Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are rounding out an incredible month that we've dedicated to this theme of global leaders, sponsored by Viasat. And today we have coming to us from across the globe in the UK, Tim Mammatt from iRed. And iRed is a Volatus company, by the way. And Tim is also appearing today as part of the third, count it 1, 2, 3, annual Volatus Above and Beyond series. So great to have you here with us today, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dawn.
Awesome. So, Tim, oftentimes I will ask people about themselves and they'll start jumping into their company. But tell us about yourself first. We'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you even got into this industry in the first place.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wild ride, but I, initially I went to university and studied business, and from there I actually set up my own marketing agency, and I think purely coincidental, I happened to meet my other half at a similar time, who lived quite far from me, so. There's a lot of long distance travel and everything for the first year or so, and then eventually I moved in with her. And so I looked for a job just to keep things ticking over. And there was a marketing role going at iRed, so I took that back in 2012. And as it would happen, I think my first week or so, they took delivery of the first octocopter, which was, enormous and flew for, I think, up to 10 minutes or something, which was, pretty incredible at the time. And it's sort of, from there, really, I've got I studied maths and physics and IT at college. And so, I was always naturally interested in the whole science behind thermal imaging and flight and drones and everything. So, yeah, I really took an interest in it. And, sort of from there, really, it snowballed. And, yeah, that sort of brings us to where I am today, working as
Well,
a director of strategy.
I love that because, it's like right and left brain engaged, that marketing kind of artsy side, and then, the science and technology side. Really, really cool that you've been able to combine those into your career at iRed. So tell us about the company.
So, iRed was founded back in 2002 by Ray Faulkner, who was the previous MD. Essentially, it was one of the first companies that was really offering thermal imaging services in the UK, essentially across a number of a number of different verticals, mostly using handheld ground-based cameras. And we were looking at electrical systems where we could see poor connections, overheating fuses. So, that was sort of a fire and sort of risk assessment sort of point of view. And then on the built environment side, we were using the cameras at night to essentially look at the heat loss in properties. And it was around about sort of 2005 or so that sort of more and more requirements came out saying, you had to have a thermal imaging survey carried out, be it for insurance purposes or as part of much larger schemes. There's one in the UK called BREEAM, where you get credits, and to get some of those credits, you have to have a thermal imaging survey done. And so we're sort of one of the first major companies sort of just focusing on the services side. And then it sort of quickly became apparent that there's other people out there that want to learn how to carry out these surveys and use the equipment. So we quickly moved into actually providing the accredited thermography training, so everyone could, who no experience with a thermal imaging camera, could pick one up, go through a thermography course, and then be a qualified thermographer at the end of it. And I then sort of joined in 2012, and that's where we started looking at using this large octocopter for looking at rooftops, because we at the time we had a 30-meter mast with or 100-foot mast for the imperial measurements, and we had a thermal imaging camera on top, which is great for looking at rooftops, but only to a certain height. And so we then looked to utilize a very large drone, and I spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of sweat and tears into integrating one of our very large and heavy handheld cameras onto this massive drone. And we got it working, and I remember high-fiving my boss at the time, because it was, it's like all of a sudden the penny dropped, and that was it. We had this working solution. And it flew for 5 minutes, back in 2012, with such a large system and a very capable thermal imaging camera. That was amazing at the time.
Yeah.
And we sort of ticked along. We were using that to look at rooftops, solar parks, and because of the whole training side of things, we're having a lot of students come to us saying, hey, what equipment should we buy? So we then, I started looking into, what will it take to, now start supplying the handheld cameras, and we were quickly became a reseller for the FLIR handheld cameras. And then obviously DJI came along with their incredible Inspire 1 and the XT thermal camera, which was a dwarf compared to our monster octocopter, and it had a better camera, and it was like a fraction of the cost. And so we then said, hey, okay, let's now start looking into supplying the drones to carry these sensors, because at the end of the day, we're just interested in the data at the end, and it doesn't matter how we capture it, and the drone is just another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, so it's so interesting to hear like the evolution, right, from the handheld thermography cameras to then training people to be thermographers, to then using drones, to then selling the drones. And so let me ask you, Tim, in this kind of ecosystem now that iRed has evolved into and created, is there an analytics piece on the back end of this? Because you mentioned the word data. It's always about the data. So how does that fit into the iRed business model?
So we've done quite a bit across quite a few different verticals, just purely analyzing the data. And to take one example, we worked with a surgery on using thermal imaging technology to look for breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And we helped develop a software platform and supplied the hardware and the integration on actually being able to use this software to detect potential areas of concern, which can then be investigated using more intrusive methods. So yeah, that was one example, and we're also involved in an Innovate UK project at the moment, using the buzzword AI and thermal imagery to be able to automatically sort of classify defects in properties. And we sort of try to steer away from a lot of the software development, because there's a lot of companies out there that are very specialist and produce some very, very good software, but we know what the niches are, and we know where things are heading. So we've looked to invest not only just in the personnel, but also the funding and everything behind it to be able to develop some more, I'd say, automated systems to be able to classify faults across a number of verticals.
Well, it's a great segue then to talk a little bit about your team, because you were talking about hiring the right personnel to continue evolving the company and innovate. Tell us a little bit about what makes your team there at iRed stand out.
So we've got, I think at the last count, 16 of us, and they range from backgrounds in the Army, the RAF. So we've got a lot of ex-forces personnel, which is great, because some of them have hands-on experience using these drones in ISR scenarios or more offensive scenarios, and it's sort of from that they've got the discipline in order to be able to provide the training and the follow the processes to be able to take a student from being totally wet behind the ears, no experience with the drone, to a very capable drone pilot to carry out all sorts of sophisticated inspections and surveys. And in fact, our director of training, Steve Welland, he's been a hobbyist in the RC world for decades now, and I think iRed owes a lot of where we are now to him because of how he's brought his hobby into iRed. And we're always talking about 3D printing this and cutting carbon plates for that, and he's brought a lot of that enthusiasm for his hobby to others, and now everyone seems to be getting involved in these very technical discussions about which filament to use and all sorts. So it's it's a great team. They're very enthusiastic, and we've got some guys who are very experienced in the BV loss side of things.
Beyond visual line of sight, I know most of our viewers know that, but for the few that don't, that's what he's talking about there, BV loss. Very, very cool. So I'm going to deviate from the script here for a second because I'm just intrigued. iRed as a company really built this whole ecosystem around thermal imagery in particular. What does iRed stand for? Does it stand for something as a name?
It's no, it's not an acronym by any means. It's just a take on infrared, because that's the part of the spectrum that the company was initially focused on, but now we've gone full spectrum now pretty much.
All right, very well. There you go. I learned something today, so I love that. That's really cool. Infrared, that makes sense. So what other unique services does iRed offer for the industry? Because as you said, thermal imagery kind of was the origin story. What have how have you kind of grown beyond, above and beyond that?
So we started with thermal imaging, and so that's just a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Drones came along. We're now looking at RGB. We're looking at multispectral, and because of the experience of our team, we've been able to, and because we have the services arm, so we actually have that industry experience. So we're using the best tools, or the right tools, I should say, to give the best results, and that translates across into our training team, because they're getting training from essentially experts in the field. And then obviously into the what we call the solutions side, where we're not just selling a drone and go, here you go, take it. We'll take them from essentially from start to finish, and it's quite often that part of what we provide will be sort of providing them with the training, but then we'll be on site with them, carrying out whatever they need to do in terms of inspections or survey. And we will show them how it's done and essentially hand it over to them, so that by the end of it, they're a very competent pilot, able to offer whatever service they're trying to do with the drone.
It's almost like train the trainer type program that you're talking about there. So let's talk a little bit about how this imagery and the service that you provide helps clients, because boy, you mentioned kind of a breast cancer use case, which is really, I'd call it like an edge use case for technology, not related to drones, of course, but you're doing so much on the autonomous and drone side. Tell us a little bit kind of about the spectrum of things that you're doing.
Well, yeah, it pretty much ranges from things on the ground, where we're using thermal imaging for, at the moment, the environmental side of things is very hot. We're talking about carbon neutral, reducing your carbon footprint, and because of the rising energy costs and everything, thermal imaging has become a great tool for actually assessing a building fabric to locate where there are any major sources of heat loss. And in this image, for example, you could see there's quite a contrast between the ceiling and the floor. Now,
okay, so walk me through that, Tim, because I don't know a ton about this, but I'm assuming blue is cold and red is hot. And
yeah, so,
what is that like white, like in the very kind of far corner? It's like white. Is that like literally like white hot?
So what we're looking at here is a thermal image using the rainbow palette. So white is at the very top, just after red, and then we have black and I think it's purple at the very bottom end for cold. And I mean, this image on its own doesn't necessarily mean anything because there's no temperature scale associated to it. So
Okay.
it's because when you take a thermal image, you are essentially capturing we call it a radiometric image. You're capturing a temperature value for every single pixel on the camera.
Okay.
And we can actually then change the palettes. We can change the scale, so we can essentially make a cold object look hot if we wanted to. Without that temperature scale to tell you what that value is, then it doesn't essentially mean anything. But what it does do in this case is provide context. So you can see that it's white in the corner, and with this palette, that means it's it's the higher end of the temperature scale compared to what we're looking at on the ground. Now that's in the corner, it's most likely just where there's a radiator. And so that will be the main heat source for this living room in this case. And the floor was bluer, and that's because there is quite well, in this case there's a temperature difference, and that can really affect thermal comfort, we call it. And all it takes is a 3-degree difference between your head and your toes to feel that difference. And we get a lot of homeowners who bought new build properties or in older properties, or they're living in a flat above a garage, and they're feeling cold no matter how much heat they're putting into the room. And using thermal imaging, we were able to say, this is why. There is that temperature differential, or there's the lack of insulation on this external wall, and because of that, we can then obviously save the homeowners quite a bit of money in heating costs. And if it's a new build, then obviously that's a warranty issue, and then that goes on to the contractor who built the properties to then rectify that issue.
Oh wow, that's a really interesting use case. I never really would have thought about that. I mean, I know people were, as you said, kind of looking at rooftops to determine, was heat escaping, but that temperature differential, like, hey, y'all didn't put insulation in the walls or on, around the floor. That makes an abundant amount of sense. So you guys also have this thing you call a white label thermal imaging report. And what is that, first of all? And secondly, how does it benefit a person's business?
So to become there's various different levels of thermography qualifications. And if you go down the accredited route, it can take you the best part of a year to secure the level 1, another year for level 2, and level 3 or category 3 potentially 1 or 2 years more.
Are these, by the way, are these UK standards or universal global standards? We're talking these levels you're talking about.
So there's a couple of different schemes. There's one by FLIR themselves called ITC, which is essentially they certify the thermographer themselves.
Gotcha.
Whereas iRed, we have both the iRed certification, where again we're certified in a thermographer, or we have what's called the personal certificate in NDT, which is an accreditation provided by the British Institute of Non-Destructive Testing, and that is a globally recognized accreditation scheme.
Okay.
And more often than not, insurance companies, developers, whatever, they will specify you have to have this accreditation. And because it can take some time to actually get the accreditation, and the handheld thermal imaging equipment is, compared to your typical DSLR camera, is very expensive.
Right. That's what I thought.
So there's a lot of companies out there that are offering complementary services. So air pressure testing is one of them. And that works hand in hand with thermal imagery, because you're then able to essentially force either the air out of a property or pull the cold air into a property, and you can see that with a thermal imaging camera very clearly. And so there's a lot of these sorts of testing companies out there, and building inspectors and building surveying companies that don't have either the capital resources to invest in setting up an in-house thermography team. So they approach us, and essentially we will offer a white label service where we go out in unbranded vehicles, uniform, or wear their uniform if necessary, and we'll turn up at a client site and carry out a survey, and we'll deliver a report all branded with our clients' logos.
Okay, that's excellent, and that makes a lot of sense also, because like you said, that's a significant investment for certain companies, and to be able to just co-brand it with you as part of your service, that is awesome. Now, you mentioned, Tim, I'm sorry to jump around, but you mentioned the kind of the training programs, almost like a train the trainer, but you offer a wide range of programs. So tell us about how they're just different from what others are offering.
Well, I think the biggest thing is the experience of our team are industry professionals, and so we're able to provide not just the standard training that meets the awarding body's required criteria, but we're actually able to provide how you would use that in the real world. It's like going to college, university doesn't really set you up for a job. It just gives you the knowledge on how to to perform some of your duties. So because we can provide this real world experience, it provides a lot of value to our clients, and we're able to go on site with them and say, right, this is what you need to do to be able to get the results you need. And I think it's definitely the most beneficial thing that iRed offer, because it's not just the training. It's the, I don't want to say hand holding, but it's that providing that value from start to finish. And it's not even when the training is complete, we're still there to offer that support, that guidance, any software they might need, and potentially collaboration on future projects.
Well, I mean, I'll use the word custom, because you're going to where the client is, you're looking at their problem set with them, you're crafting a very tailored solution, teaching them how to implement that, and then providing that service on the back end, that continuing kind of consultation as they move forward, if they have their own program. Now, part of this, Tim, right, also is that you have different equipment available either for sale, for hire. Do you also lease equipment? Like what's kind of your model when it comes to equipment?
So we're solutions driven. So our client will come to us with an issue, be it, they want to look at weeds in a field of crops, or they want to, we've had some conservation groups who are wanting to look for a particular species of bird nest in wetlands, and they'll come to this issue. We say, okay, right, well, these are the potential issues that you're going to come across, and these are the approaches you can take to mitigate against this. And it's an interesting one, because not a day goes past where someone approaches us with a problem that we haven't come across before, we haven't heard of before, but because of what we have experienced, and because we understand the technology and how to apply it, we can provide them with the best solution. We're not here just to shift boxes. We'll say, right, okay, this is the equipment. Now, to use that equipment, you need to have the right training. You need to be, not just unable to say fly the drone, but you need to understand how to collect that data, and then you need to understand how to process that data to give you the results you need.
Yeah, so interesting. So I heard weeds, birds, roofs, airflow. Let me ask you, you said people come to you all the time with something that you never really thought of. What's one of the weirdest use cases that someone has come to you for, that you were able to help them with? through the services that you offer?
Well, I'm not sure it's necessarily suitable for this stream, but
Oh, God.
certainly a project my old boss was involved with was to do with the human anatomy and how blood flows around, and how
Oh my
you can
gosh.
clearly see that.
Was this for a Netflix documentary on vegan diets?
No, well, this is going back probably over a decade, I would say, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was used on that. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there. So we'll move on in a second, but I just got to tell everybody there's a show on Netflix. It's called "You Are What You Eat." They tracked a handful of identical twins, and they gave one a vegan diet, one an omnivorous diet, and they did all kinds of different teams did scientific reviews over an 8-week period. And one of them was, let's just call it blood flow using thermal imagery. So interesting. Okay, I'll step away from that one, but I had to ask you. I just thought it was interesting because you guys have been involved in so many different things, not just on the drone side, but let's talk a little bit about the agricultural piece because you mentioned weeds, but precision agriculture is where it's at right now, right? And
100%.
not only that, but you guys are also helping farmers. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in that space?
Sure, yeah. So we're very fortunate that we've got great connections with a local, fairly large farming group. And initially, we rented a property from them, and once they found out what it is that we did and what we could do, they actually started getting very excited. Now they've got one of the largest robotic greenhouses in Europe.
Oh,
So
wow.
they're very progressive. They're very open to the adoption of new technology. And so that one of the first thing they said was, "Hey, can you just fly a drone over one of our fields of, I think, of spinach, just to see where there was any residual weed killer still down, because that was affecting their crops, and they wanted to know, where they'd have to then treat it or dig it up and replace it." So,
Now this was in a greenhouse.
and so in this case, this was a field.
Oh, okay. Because
Uh,
I was going to say greenhouses are GPS denied environments. I'm very familiar with that. So interesting. Okay, so this was in a field, spinach, and you're looking for a weed killer. So how did that go?
Well, I mean, it was one of the sort of the first jobs that we had done with I think it was an Inspire One at the time, actually, and it was the first sort of foray into photogrammetry for iRed, and
Yeah.
they were very open, and they're letting us use the land for flying and testing things on. So we're like, yeah, we'll give it a go, and we were able to fly down there, cover the area that they were looking at in, I think it was like 5 or 10 minutes or something like that, to give them that whole perspective of the field, which we were
Right.
then able to sort of stitch all those images together and say, right, yeah, you can clearly see there's a quite a major dead spot in this area. From that, they were then able to then treat that area of land to then bring it back to normality, so they could continue growing crops there. And it was sort of from that to say, well, okay, can you now look for this in our field? And we're struggling with the yield of this field. So we're like, yeah, okay, well, let's we started looking into multispectral, and from that we were then able to see where the crops were underperforming, or there were potential issues from pests or weeds. And we were very fortunate that we were open. We were able to sort of test these sorts of sensors and drones out, with this farming group, because they were so progressive. But when we tried approaching other farmers, they were, "Oh, no drones, no, absolutely not. Don't think they're great. Don't want anything to do with them." But then when you talk to their sons and daughters, they're like, "Oh yeah, drones are amazing. Let's give it a go." And so we found actually that approach has worked quite well. And we found it's always been a case of educating them on what benefits it can give them. And I think a recent one was they were wanting to fly a drone with a thermal camera ahead of a combine harvester, so
Okay.
that they could, where we are at the moment, there's a lot of deer that migrate down here, and so they wanted to be able to spot any of these deer that could potentially be in the path of the combine harvester, so they could
Oh,
either stop, scare them off, and just make sure that no animals are harmed whilst they are harvesting their field.
Oh, that's cool. So it's almost like a strict, almost like surveillance slash security operation to for wildlife protection. Just the use cases are endless, really, when you think about it. That's quite
Absolutely.
amazing. Now, Tim, you mentioned DJI a couple times. You have an iRed store. You're selling a lot of things. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and kind of what your offerings include?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, initially, as I mentioned, we started with the thermal imaging side of things. So naturally, DJI were one of the first to offer, I think, the most affordable thermal imaging solution possible, and still to date, they have the Mavic 3 thermal, which is by far one of our more best-selling drones out there, not just for the sort of test and inspection side of things, but also public safety, which is probably our second largest vertical that we work with.
But wait a minute, we didn't even talk about this. So what are you guys doing with public safety? Is it with wildland firefighting? Is it with search and rescue, or all the above, or more?
Yeah, essentially all of the above. We work with probably most of the public safety organisations in the UK in some capacity at the moment. We've worked with there's a local police force on integrating a VTOL platform with their with the National Police Air Service. So we've even gone as far as having to have the whole drone wrapped in vinyl to match their colour scheme.
Well, I
So
love that, honestly, because I think there should be a distinct markings on police drones,
yeah,
just like they are on police vehicles on the ground. And
yeah.
especially as the airspace becomes more congested, but we can talk about that some other day. So keep talking. So they wrap their drones, and what are they using them for?
So that's to see how well they can essentially complement, not replace the helicopters, but how well that because there's dozens, if not hundreds, of call outs or call out requests for a police helicopter or an air ambulance or any form of manned aviation in the public safety side that can't be met. So there are various sort of sandboxes and trials going on in the UK at the moment on how they can utilize unmanned technology to essentially either fulfill some of those requests where they don't need to have manned aviation involved.
So
If
wait a
there's
minute. Are you all involved then, not just on the smaller drones, but when you said VTOL, I assumed it was a drone.
Yeah.
Uh, are you talking like eVTOL, like a large passenger carrying aircraft that could evacuate somebody or do something along these lines as well?
No, that's just this is just the unmanned systems at the
Gotcha. Okay.
moment.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say that. I mean, I was like, whoa, that, that's pretty, no, but I mean, just those use cases that you're talking about with public safety, not something we had talked about, but so critically important. And frankly, from a societal standpoint, something that's very visible, like you talked about the wrapping, why are they doing that? It's because the public sees it. And, if they see the good that can come from drones, I think that just helps advance the industry. That's so cool that you're also involved in that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So I'm sorry I like kind of diverted a little bit on this public safety line of effort. I want to go back to your store because I don't want to give that short shrift. So you have some DJI products. What other kinds of drones or brands or things are you selling on your store?
So one thing we like to offer our customers is choice. Obviously, naturally, DJI is our biggest seller. They've got, I think the last count was about 80% market share, and they're the most affordable systems out there. But see, we know now that there's this sort of geopolitical issues around using Chinese manufactured drones and the security concerns around that. So we have a number of other brands that we work with. Ascent Aerosystems is one of them, which is that cylindrical coaxial system you would have seen in some of the images earlier. And we also work with quite a few UK-based companies. UAV Tech is another one that we work with, and that's a UK manufacturer of both nano drones, so sub 250, and they go all the way up to the much larger VTOL platforms, which are heavily used more in the sort of defense and the public safety side of things.
Oh, here's that drone you were talking about, Tim.
Yes, yeah, that's right, the Spirit. Yeah, it's yeah, definitely one of my favorite drones. It's an absolutely incredible system.
So
And,
what are your clients using this one for?
so the defense space is quite big on it. And the public safety side, because it's got a very low noise profile and visual profile, so you could line it up against some trees 100 meters away and you wouldn't hear it, and yet you can have a very powerful EOIR sensor on there, which will be able to monitor an area or a suspect, and it's you can mount a camera on the top and it can perch and just observe an area for some time, and it's it breaks down, it's very compact and it's modular, so you can quite easily chop and change the different parts and add another battery for extended flight time. So we're seeing a lot of public safety organizations are interested in and utilize it, as well as the defense space.
So you're also in that space. Tim, what don't you do? I mean, you're also in the defense space as well. Like, it's so funny that I'm talking to you right now, because next month's theme is protectors and defenders, and you're doing a lot in that space as well. So defense is another one of your clients and markets.
Yes, yeah, I think. Well, unfortunately, off the back of everything going on over in Ukraine,
Yeah.
That's really brought awareness on just how effective utilizing very cheap, affordable, off-the-shelf drones can be.
Yes.
And so that's now increase the amount of interest from a number of defense organizations on how they can either implement their technology on a drone, or how they can shoot a drone down from the sky. We've been involved in projects where we're testing these counter drone systems. So it's definitely it has one of the largest appetites at the moment for drones. And yes, it's a good thing, but also it's not, because I'm a firm believer drones for good, and where we can save lives rather than potentially end them is best.
Well, I agree, but I would also say, Tim, I think there's a lot of humanitarian purposes that drones could be used for, even on the battlefield, whether it's delivering blood or insulin to citizens that maybe lost access to healthcare because their area has been affected by the conflict, to civil society. I know drones have been used to find mines, to locate mines that are buried underground or in the water. So, I think there are so many cases also, even on the defense side, that will help civil society and save lives of our own and our partner soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and in our case, guardians. But interesting that you're also involved in that. Tim, I knew our time would fly and we are getting close to the end of our time together. I want to make sure that I covered everything you wanted to talk about, because this was quite an around the world of all the things that iRed is doing. And man, is it varied. Kind of started with that handheld thermal camera, and now just has expanded into an amazing team that's doing training and providing services and selling equipment and doing almost everything in every market you can think of. What did we miss? What did you want to cover before we close out the show?
Oh, well, I know we sort of went all over the place, and it's one of the perks of the jobs, I would say. There's always something new, something going on that it hasn't been done before, and it's part of my job to try and stay on top of that. But I think we've covered a lot. I think one thing that we haven't really spoke about is probably the regulatory side of things, but that's a whole nother issue, and how I think
Well,
that's
let's go there because I mean we have a minute or two, and at least in the U.S., most of our audience is very familiar with that, and in our case, Part 107, and not having a beyond visual line of sight rule yet, and things of this nature. How's it going in the UK? In terms of beyond visual line of sight and on the regulatory front.
well, I would say it's getting there. Whilst our Civil Aviation Authority are, they're very open to drone use, and I think because of the whole Brexit thing, which has caused everyone a bit of a headache in the UK, that has complicated things somewhat. But I think we're on the right path. It's just now whether or not we can speed things up. Really, they've got a few sandboxes out at the moment to essentially enable BV loss. And in fact, I heard today from one of my clients that they've been granted extended visual line of sight out to 9 kilometers with control over 4G, which is, I think, a first in the UK.
Wow, that's cool.
There won't be many organisations out there that are capable of offering that.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult. We have to involve Ofcom, which regulates essentially the radio part of the spectrum for the communications with the drones. So you have to make sure you involve them. You have to involve the actual service providers for the 4G. So that there's a lot of moving parts involved in this, and it does hamper the innovation and the ability to to test a lot of this new technology and these new drone platforms to essentially maximize the potential out of them.
Well, Tim, is that something that iRed also offers, is kind of consultation or assistance to your clients? Because you just mentioned it was a client that obtained this very special approval. Do you help them along the way, work with your different authorities to pull something together and put a package in to get the necessary regulatory approvals?
Yeah, so I mean, we will supply them with either the equipment. A lot of the cases for BV loss, you need to have that electronic conspicuity.
Yes.
So we can provide the hardware. We're actually involved in an integration of a transponder at the moment for ADS-B out for a DJI platform. And we offer the guidance as well. We do have, because of our pedigree with some of our personnel who are very experienced in the BV loss side of things, we are advising some of our clients who are either looking to do something like drop articles from a drone, which at the moment is a big no-no by the CAA.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously there are scenarios where that needs to happen, and so we're guiding the customer and helping them produce their operational safety case to be able to do that.
Wow. So unbelievable. So from drone delivery to defense to public safety to precision agriculture to photogrammetry and everything else in between. That's iRed, everybody. Tim, how can people reach you and learn more about iRed? Because we are about 1 minute out from our time.
So I'd say the best way to get hold of me or see what I'm up to is my LinkedIn. I'm often posting about new innovative technologies or sensors or drones in this industry, and I will be at the Commercial UAV Expo in Las Vegas in September as well. So I'm traveling across the pond, which will be an experience. So but yeah, obviously our website ired.co.uk. You can reach me through the hold all email there, but yeah, LinkedIn's the best way.
All right, awesome. And you will be at embedded in the Volatus Aerospace area there at Commercial UAV?
That's right.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person there and seeing the team. And Tim, since you're traveling from overseas, I hope you'll get there a little early. Shameless plug, I'm doing a networking, our 4th annual Flash Mob Networking Happy Hour. More details to follow, but that will be Monday night on what we call Labor Day in the United States. the day before the big kickoff of the actual event. So hopefully you can make it, and everybody else out there, hope to see you as well. And Tim, this was so fun. This was fast and furious. Got to know all the different things you're doing. It's just really unbelievable, the scope and scale, and it's no wonder Volatus was like, we want to partner with them. So great to have you. Great to have you on the show and learn a little bit more. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. We are out here.